right, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Sunday, July 24th. It is 81 degrees in Kitsap County. I hope that you are staying hydrated and cool. As you know, we were just live a little earlier. Mount Zion was having a health fair with Kitsap Public Health. And so that was awesome. They had staff on hand to provide vaccinations for Moderna and for Pfizer. And they also had masks, the good ones. They had Narcan. They had just a lot of different educational things and giveaways, food. So it was really good and really informative. It is over now. It was 1 to 3. They will have another one soon. And so as that happens, I will keep you all posted on that. Thank you, Rob. Glad that I am coming through loud and clear. Well, we're going to get right into it today. We have a packed show for you. As you know, this is the Civic Second. And in the Civic Second, what we do is we cover the city council meetings on Wednesday, and then we discuss them after, and we talk about the issues that impact our community, either city, county, or nationwide, or maybe even globally. And today we have a special guest, Rebecca Parsons. So we're going to bring her on. You saw her yesterday as our discussion on social housing, and she is running, and she's going to come and we're going to spend some time and find out what she's all about and what her platform is, and what she can do for us. So we're really excited about that. And then we also have Sean Macarin, who is going to join us again, and we'll have some other folks that will kind of join us as Rebecca is speaking for the second half of this conversation. So if you do have any questions for Rebecca, please type them in the chat, and I will be sure to ask her. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and bring Rebecca on.
Hi, Marlon. Thank you. Thank you.
How
Thank
are
you
you
to the
doing?
crowd.
Absolutely. And I'm
good.
going to
How are
bring on
you?
Sean too.
Hi, Sean.
Everyone gets
Hi,
applause.
Rebecca.
Everyone gets applause. How you doing, Sean?
Good. How are you guys?
Oh,
Great.
I am fantastic. Much better now that I'm in a cool environment. But y'all don't want to hear from me. Y'all want to hear from Rebecca. So I'm going to pass it on to you, Rebecca. And again, we'll just tell us who you are and, why you wanted to run, what your platform is, things that you see. And I understand this obviously can't be an all-inclusive list of all the things that you would like to change, but just kind of your top things that are important to you. And yeah, for sure. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me and for giving me this opportunity, as well as the social housing panel. Yeah, my name's Rebecca Parson, and I'm running for Congress in Washington's 6th District, which is most of Tacoma, Kitsap County, and the Olympic Peninsula. I live in Tacoma, running as a Democrat. A little bit about my background. I have been a commissioner on the Tacoma Commission on Disabilities for 4 or 5 years now, and I chair the committee that is bringing a wheelchair accessible taxi service to Tacoma. Between 20 and 25%, so 1/4 or 1/5 of the city has a disability. So the fact that we don't have a wheelchair accessible taxi service for people really is a big need that is not being filled right now. So I'm glad that I've been able to help with the committee on getting the ball rolling on that. We had a report commission, got the report back, and now we're working on securing funding to get this going because it's been delayed for a while now, of course, during the pandemic. I've also served as a court-appointed special advocate for kids in foster care. It's basically like a volunteer social worker for kids in the foster care system. I'm a small business owner, so I have experienced what it's like personally as a self-employed small business owner, what it's like getting through the pandemic and how difficult it's been. And my policies, why am I running? I'm running because there isn't anybody else in the race who supports policies like Medicare for All. Medicare for All was a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren type policy that would ensure that everybody has healthcare in the country, regardless of what your income level is. So during the pandemic, over 330,000 of the COVID deaths in this country were because those 330,000 people didn't have healthcare. If they'd had healthcare, they would be alive today. And then during non-pandemic years, it's 68,000 people approximately who die every year because of not having healthcare, and that's just inexcusable. So I support Medicare for All to address that. I also support a national housing plan so that we can have permanently affordable housing for everyone, from people who are homeless, the over 600,000 homeless people in our country right now, and homelessness is really a crisis in our district as well. I've been involved with organizing around homelessness and housing and getting more shelter beds in Tacoma, and I know it's a big issue in Bremerton, Kitsap County as well. And then on Bainbridge as well, people who work in the grocery store, in the service industry on the island that can't afford to live there, long commute. So it's a huge issue, homelessness and housing, both to get people into shelter and then also people who currently are in a house or a home, but they can barely afford it, paying over half their income on rent. And I also support a national jobs program like we had during the Great Depression under FDR. Actually, that has a great history here in our district. There were 7 civilian conservation corps camps on the Olympic Peninsula. And so those were work camps that did things like build trails through the national parks, build lodges, bathrooms, amenities and infrastructure that we still use today. And so as part of a national jobs program, that would bring good union jobs to the 6th district. And those jobs would be mostly in transitioning us to renewable energy. So going from our fossil fuel infrastructure, our energy grid, over to renewable will require a lot of work laying down the physical infrastructure that's needed. Then there's a lot of other stuff we need as well, bridges that are crumbling, potholes everywhere. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And a lot of people who need jobs and need good jobs, not working 60, 70 hours a week doing multiple gig jobs. That's not what I have in mind. I have in mind a good union job, pays well at 40 hours a week. And then related to that, I'm also the only candidate in the race who supports a $30 minimum wage. The current federal minimum wage, it's higher here in Washington State and in our district, but federally the minimum wage is $7.25. That is nowhere near enough. It actually needs to be a little bit over 3 times that, according to data from MIT. If you Google the MIT living wage calculator, you'll see that $30 per hour is the bare minimum that people need to live in this country, to survive and get by. It's just a living wage floor is $30 per hour. And so that's why I support that. A lot of people then ask, well, isn't that going to put small businesses out of business? Well, that's where I believe that the federal government needs to come in and help subsidize small businesses to pay their employees more and to pay them a living wage, while letting large corporations like Walmart and Amazon, whose employees are currently on food stamps because they're not getting paid enough, those corporations can afford it, but small business owners may need help from the federal government to raise the minimum wage. So for me, it's about this election. Coming up, the election day is August 2nd, next Tuesday. You have until then to put your ballot in the mail or in a ballot drop box. It's about the economy, about helping people with inflation, getting out federal inflation relief checks, raising the minimum wage, making sure everybody has healthcare and housing, and that the basics of life are taken care of. Proud to be the only person in the race supporting those policies. And I am also very, very much pro-choice, and I'm the only pro-choice woman in the race. And actually in this district, we have never had a woman representing us in Congress. So if elected, I would be the first woman in Congress from this district, and I'm the only pro-choice woman in the race. So very important to me to get Roe v. Wade codified into law, and also to protect LGBTQ plus rights, because I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community, and I do not want to see the Supreme Court overturning same-sex marriage. So whether it's on inflation or the Green New Deal or social issues and our constitutional rights, I'm really proud to have strong stances on all of those issues. I've been endorsed by local members of the community, as well as national figures like Marianne Williamson and organizations like Brand New Congress. But I don't want to go on too long, so I think I'll leave it with that for the introduction. But thank you again, Marwan, for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I'm happy to take questions from you or the audience, or move on to the next topic, whatever works. Thank you.
Sure, sure. I appreciate that. And a lot of the things that you're saying definitely resonate with me. I talk often about the wages here, and $20 an hour basically equates to about 40,000 a year. So at 30,000, or at $30 an hour, it's about 60,000 if you're working 2,000 hours. And so when you take taxes and everything else out, and the cost of renting, which is not
Mhm.
affordable, there's just nothing left. The question that came up yesterday, because you mentioned this yesterday also, was if the government is going to subsidize small businesses, like I'm a small business owner, right? And I can't pay people $20 an hour right now.
Mhm.
Where will the money come from to pay the $30 an hour?
Well, that's a good question. One way would be making sure that corporations are paying a federal corporate tax. Right now, large corporations, many of them do not pay federal corporate taxes. So we need to make sure that they are actually doing that. That would raise a lot of money. And then also raising taxes on the top 1%. We used to have much higher taxes than we do now. But 40, 50 years ago, it was normal to have, 50, 60% taxes for people who are the absolute very wealthiest. And I'm not suggesting taxes that high for the absolute wealthiest, but we can definitely raise it from where it is right now because they're historically low. So those would be some ways that we could raise money to subsidize small business owners to raise the minimum wage or to pay the minimum wage. Another is cracking down on offshore tax havens. Very, very wealthy individuals and corporations hide their money in these, secret tax havens overseas, cracking down on that. And then also the IRS right now they go after low income, working class, poor people at double or triple the rate that they do after wealthy people. And often the excuse given is that it's just easier to go after people who have less money because their tax returns are less complicated. They don't have an army of lawyers defending them. But I really do think it's unfair for a federal agency to be going after people who are already struggling to get by so much while you have people like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. Those, the very, very ultra wealthy are not getting audited the way people like us are. And so we need to have the IRS focused on making sure that the ultra wealthy are actually paying their taxes. Like even under the current tax code, they're not paying what they're supposed to be. So make sure they actually are, and then also raise the tax rate on the ultra wealthy.
Yeah, Sean, I'll circle back to that. Do you have any questions or comments for Rebecca?
Yeah, I mean, my initial comment is it's just really refreshing to hear a congressional candidate talking about actually helping people rather than what I often hear from the incumbent is how he likes helping people or how he just wants to help people. I went to one of Mr. Kilmer's town halls a couple months ago, and I myself asked him about Medicare for all, and his response was he doesn't think it's doable. And I come from a family where we hold people like RFK, FDR in high regard. People who looked at problems and said, "Yeah, this may be difficult, but we're going to try, and it's worth doing because it could save lives." So, my initial comment is just really, it's great to have a candidate in front of us who's giving us these options. And I guess I have a more specific question on financial policy for you, Rebecca, but where do you think like the recent bailouts for industry come into play? Because I often hear, we can't afford to pay for social services, but during the pandemic, the US government basically printed money to keep big business afloat. So, you know, what about my share? And like, do you have any more detail on that, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. There's there have been so many examples in the news of these corporate bailouts during COVID, where the money was funneled into stuff that the program was not intended for, whether it's actual fraud, like people creating fake businesses and essentially were literally stealing millions of dollars away from the federal government and from it's our money, our public money, and they were stealing it for fake businesses so that they could get rich off of the pandemic. And then you also have it done legally, where money was funneled into increasing CEO pay or stock buybacks. Stock buyback is where, publicly traded company that's traded on the stock exchange, they want to reduce the number of shares that are out there, so they buy them back. And since there are fewer, each one becomes worth more money. And so it makes their shareholders richer, but it doesn't actually make the company itself run any better. It's not more efficient. They haven't hired more actual workers. It's just about short-term profit for the owners and shareholders. And another example, in the airline industry, the airlines got huge bailouts during the pandemic with COVID relief because obviously the travel industry and in particular air travel just tanked during the pandemic. And there was included in that the provision that they could not lay off. If they took the money, they couldn't lay off workers. So they just found a workaround and really pushed early retirements on their staff, especially on pilots who are highly paid. And so now with, it's been in the news a lot if you've tried traveling at all, that the airlines are currently a mess. A lot of flights are getting delayed and canceled, and people waiting for hours or days even sometimes in airports. And the issue is that the airlines, they did these, heavily encouraged early retirements for pilots who it takes years to train to become a pilot. They can't just snap a finger and find the pilots they need. But then also they're just getting away with charging customers for flights they know they can't possibly fill because they just don't have the staff. So, we have these huge corporations, Delta, American Airlines, who are essentially swindling us, taking our public money and not serving the public, just serving themselves. So I agree. I like the way you framed it, Sean, because it's like these corporations, large, publicly traded corporations, extremely wealthy individuals like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk getting billions of dollars in subsidies. But when it comes to us getting some help to just pay our rent, then it's like, oh, how can we afford it? Where's the money? Well, the money's there. It's just currently going to rich people instead of the rest of us.
Do you think it would be helpful to kind of do away with the incentives that they give that these companies like Walmart's and Amazon? They say, "Oh, if you build here, you don't have to pay taxes. We'll do this, we'll do that," and then they do end up subsidizing, their employees. Right, their employees are collecting SNAP benefits and needing other resources because they're not paying a livable wage, and so what I hear back is, well, if you tax them, then they'll leave, right? And I kind of feel like, good riddance. But if all the states came together and said, you know what, if you're going to do business, and I mean, because we're your consumers, you're going to do right by the American people. If we all kind of held the line on that, would that go a long way with fixing the situation?
Yeah, I think so. And you're right. I mean, on top of the subsidies that they're given to build in a municipality, then they pay so little. Their workers are on food stamps and Medicaid. And that's another public subsidy where we're paying for their employees' food and healthcare because they are cheaping out on actually paying their workers a living wage. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I saw a question from Rob: with an inflation relief check, how do you propose to do that and not cause more inflation? That's a good question. What I would propose is, and this addresses more than one problem, but increasing U.S. manufacturing and actually producing stuff here in America again. Stopping the offshoring of factories, of jobs, and actually producing stuff here, because inflation occurs when there is too much money and not enough stuff to buy. And so one way to address that is to be producing more stuff so there actually is enough to buy. And that would have the effect of, helping with all the supply chain issues we've been having if we're producing more stuff here. More self-sufficiency, if we boost our own agriculture, helps with food, rising food prices. So it would help with multiple problems that we're facing right now. But yeah, U.S. manufacturing and agriculture, bring it back. and have people producing stuff here. So there's stuff to buy, and you don't have that inflation issue.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, there's a
Yeah.
bit of a misunderstanding, I think, about this current cause of inflation. And if you go listen to a lot of the SEC earnings calls for these publicly traded companies, a common thing you hear across the board is, we're doing well because we're raising prices. You know, there's not a lot of the inflation we're seeing now is not a cause is caused by just companies raising prices because they can. They have monopoly power. No one's questioning them about it. No workers are striking because of it. Federal agencies have entirely forgotten how to regulate corporations who are out of control, and they're openly announcing it on SEC phone calls. We're just raising prices because we can. It's straight, simple price gouging. And even more to Rob's point, if you're going to say a handout to poor people causes inflation, you have to actually trace that dollar to the poor person and then trace out how it causes inflation. When you're just saying a government handout causes inflation and not looking at the full picture, say like the blank check the federal government gives to the military every year, you know, that's money that's out in the system. Why is it the money that, like, seriously, and this covers up this exposes the fallacy of some of the inflation talk. If the money is spent for corporate on the military industrial defense complex, there's no inflation. If the money goes to a poor lady in Chicago, somehow she's a welfare queen and we've got inflation now. Like, that's a fallacy. That's an incongruency that people need to start educating themselves about and talking more about. Because, like, you know, it's not as simple as, you know, we gave out relief checks and now there's inflation. We're giving out money to lots of people. And why for some people is there inflation, but for other folks there's not? And it's usually the poor people who cause inflation.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also, if people want to get more information about another source of inflation, you can Google. Oh, actually, the link is in the chat now. Matt Stoller, he's an economist, and he found that up to 60% of inflation is being driven by corporate profits. And like Sean said, you know, you hear them on these earnings calls, and it's like, wow, we're doing so well. And there's really no, there's no, you know, we used to regulate corporations a lot more than we do now. And we could be doing that, and that would be a way to really tamp down on inflation as well.
Yeah, so I have a question for you, Rebecca. Like, earlier this month, I believe it was this month, there's a brouhaha about Pete Buttigieg, our Secretary of Transportation, kind of sending out a tweet on how to cope with airline cancellations. And a good commentator, David Sirota, kind of shot back, like, it's your job to regulate. Like, as a congressperson, would you hold hearings and use your power to try and investigate some of these acts and put them into the public light and help voters like me, like, regain some trust in government and see that you're working?
Yeah, I would. I would hold hearings if I could. And I just say if I could because Congress is at such a, it's a so bought off. And the chair, you know, I don't know how many people know this, but like the chairmanships of committees in Congress you buy them basically. You know, the party in power, whether it's the Democratic Party or the Democratic or Republican Party, and how much do you fundraise and then donate to the Republican National Committee or the Democratic National Committee? How much you give them basically buys you favor, and then you are able to get a chair on the committee. So you're basically buying the seat. And then, you know, so where do you get all that money from? You know, corporate donations. And so you're not going to hold hearings on corporations. So just with that caveat, I know sometimes people say, well, what could you do, you know, as one person, a freshman congresswoman? Nothing happens anyway. Even if they are not doing anything right now. It's more about using the seat as a bullhorn. And so if I couldn't hold the hearings myself, then I would use the office, you know, of being in Congress to get data from corporations, demand the data, pull the data, go through it, with my staff, and then do my own sort of hearing, like go on Instagram Live, Facebook Live, Twitch, go through it, talk about it, take people's questions, and do my own sort of version of a hearing, but whatever it would take to get the information out there. And I think that's a great point. About Pete Buttigieg, like, here's what you can do, and essentially here's ways to do coupon clipping when airlines are ripping you off, but actually it's his job to regulate and restrain corporations and corporate abuses. So it's a huge issue. There was an article I was going to pull up, but I can't remember it now. So anyway, I'll turn it back over to you, Sean or Marwan.
There's a great documentary on HBO called The Swamp that really goes through what Rebecca's talking about with Congress being bought off. And funny enough, Matt Gaetz kind of features prominently in it, and he's a voice that's really against money in politics right now. But I really like that proposal. Did you see Rob Dent's question about public housing on the ballot and who owns that housing versus what we have now, and how does this benefit low to moderate individuals? Like, for public housing, the public would own it. Like this, our government would own it on behalf of the public. Right now, private individuals buy and develop whatever they want. Like, I live in a planned development in Port Orchard. Like, that was entirely done by private individuals, financed by private individuals, sold to private individuals, and will be continued to be sold by private individuals. Whereas like public housing, the state owns it and they run it without a profit. And so in theory, we own it that way. And how I think it would benefit moderate income individuals is it takes the market out of housing rather than having to go buy housing or rent housing at whatever someone's charging you, which we talked a little bit about here, may not even reflect what are considered market conditions. You can you'll just have that house there without having to compete for other people with rent or worry about what a landlord might charge. That's how I think it helps moderate income folks. Sorry.
Becca, did you want to respond to that question?
Yeah, I agree with that. With the public owning it instead of private developers or Wall Street firms like BlackRock that are buying up entire neighborhoods, then the public gets to decide how that's used. Is it going to be used to just generate profit or to actually house people? And then that would help low to moderate income individuals because they'd be the one making the decisions. Another way to do that, and it's not instead of, but in addition to, is community land trusts. And what that is if you think of like a conservation land trust, which is where you have a piece of land that has some environmental value, and then this land trust is put in place so that you can't put up housing developments on it, commercial developments, cell phone towers. It's just going to stay the way it is, pristine, and preserve the environment for generations to come. A community land trust is a similar idea, but for housing and making sure that housing will be permanently affordable always. And the community gets to decide what to do with it. And so what I would support as part of my housing plan, and what I do support, is more federal money directly to community land trusts. So not sending it through real estate developers, not through government agencies and middlemen, sending it to, community land trusts made up of actual community members, not bankers, not people who stand to benefit from profit in housing, but actual community members to buy land and have it be permanently affordable. So if there's actually an example of this on Bainbridge. I can't remember the name of the development right now, but there's a community land trust on Bainbridge Island, and I've been there for like a tour, and it's really nice. And I talked to people there, and one woman told me she uses a wheelchair and is on a fixed income, and said she wouldn't be able to afford to live on Bainbridge without this. So basically she bought her house that she lives in from the community land trust. And then in her contract, there's a stipulation that when she sells it, I don't know the exact structure of that one, but basically she's not going to be selling it for double, triple, quadruple what she bought it for. It's going to be at a reasonable rate. And then the land that the house is on is still owned by the community land trust. So that's one way to keep it affordable as well.
Let's welcome Jeff to the panel. Jeff, how you doing there?
Hi there. Sorry, can you hear me first of all?
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear. Did you have
Perfect.
a question or a comment for Rebecca? We've got a few more questions.
No, I've just been listening in at this point, and I'm settling in for our remote. Anybody who says doing a remote broadcast is easy is wrong. I had no idea. Anyway, so I'll just sit back and listen for now. I'm in an undisclosed location right now.
Jeff,
Thank you.
Jeff, you know the land trust up in Bainbridge, right? What's the name is escaping me.
Sorry. I'm sorry. What?
What's the name of the land trust up in Bainbridge? Those folks.
I wish I could remember. I want to say the Banbridge Land Trust, but I don't know. We're definitely looking into that, and I'm looking forward to learning more about that too.
Is that something the federal government could subsidize, Rebecca? Like,
Yeah, the federal government could provide funding. Like the way the federal government mostly provides help with housing now is like block grants through HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and helping with funding for Section 8 vouchers. But anybody who's tried to apply for housing before that way knows you could be out there for 5 years and still not get a place. And there's going to be all kinds of rules like, no pet or you have to make a certain amount of income. I mean, so often you can't even qualify for it. But I think the federal government needs to be providing money in a smarter way, and that could be straight to community organizations that is made up, has a board basically of community members who decide what to do, and that is it's a really good way to prevent gentrification and people getting pushed out of neighborhoods or communities where they have been living for generations. If they actually, as a group can get together and have money to buy land, and the housing that's on top of it really helps with gentrification.
I have a question for you. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Marlon.
So I'm going to change the subject. So if it's on this, let's stay on this line.
No, I'm good. Go ahead with your question.
You're good. Okay. So here's my question for you, Rebecca. You would be the first woman, first LGBT candidate from here that would take office here. I'm a foundational Black American, and so there are a lot of concerns that I have, and the nation, the world really got to see. I mean, we had Rodney King in the '90s, and then we get George Floyd, and that seemed to activate everyone. But that seems to be kind of waning now, as other things are um, slowly taking its place as being more important. I was dismayed when Congress passed an AAPI hate bill, but did not pass one for African Americans. That was definitely a concern for me. And while there were definitely issues uh, that AAPI community members were facing, um, we're still being, I mean, it's almost daily, where we're being, brutalized and murdered by police and violence and everything else that's going on. So, uh, is there any platform that you have for us? And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. And I do think that we need specific, I believe in universal programs like I've been talking about, but we also need programs specifically for African Americans in this country because of the unique, history and circumstances that African Americans in this country are in. And one of those is reparations for slavery. And there's multiple aspects to it. One is certainly, I mean, it's obvious that the effects of hundreds of years of enslavement and then subsequent discrimination is still having impacts today. That's indisputable. And so that's one reason to provide reparations. And it's not so much about, I don't know, there's a common, I think it's a cartoon that goes around showing like equality versus equity, and equality is, everybody's on this line and you just give everybody, $10. But if one person's at this level and this level and this level, and you give them all $10, they all just move up like that, but it's still unequal. So that's where you need to have targeted programs. Then the other part of reparations is that it's simply money that's owed. The 40 acres and a mule, it was not paid. And so this is a debt, and the debt should be paid, and the government should make good on the promise. So it's also a moral and financial obligation that has not been filled. And so I support a modern version of 40 acres and a mule for African Americans in this country, or African descendants of slaves, like whatever the community definition. But yeah, I support reparations. And then I think we also need to bring back the full Voting Rights Act. It's been gutted piece by piece over the decades, and even more with the Supreme Court that we have now. But it's not the case 50 years later, after the Civil Rights Movement, that the Southern states are just good to go. That they're, we see as soon as elements of the Voting Rights Act are removed, then suddenly ballot boxes in predominantly Black neighborhoods start disappearing, and they're being, it's so obvious. So the Voting Rights Act also needs to come back. And then on policing, we need to demilitarize the police. The weaponry and equipment that police have, a lot of it comes from the military. So why are we having, unlike the military, police are not trained for combat in war zones, but they're given combat equipment and machinery. And so I would vote for and co-sponsor and push for stopping the transfer of military equipment to police departments. And there was actually, even before George Floyd, I think it was in around 2014, 15, there was an amendment to a bill, and it was to do that, to demilitarize, stop the program of transferring military equipment to police departments. And the incumbent in my race, Kilmer, he voted against that. So that's something I would have voted for, to stop that. And then we also need to have more, the exact name of the procedure is escaping me right now, but when there's a police department that's riddled with corruption and racism, systemic racism, racial profiling, and the Justice Department, U.S. Justice Department, can come in and start to investigate, oversee, because the department has proven that it's unable to fix it itself. And I think the U.S. Justice Department needs to come in and be doing that a lot more than it is right now. So,
Well, let me, before you answer Mark's question there, and I think he's going to join us here in a minute. And I, to not sound like Trump, I do believe in law and order. That said, I kind of feel like if we were to do away with qualified immunity, and bad officers were held accountable, then America at large would understand, if okay, this is how we needed to apprehend this person, or resolve the issue, and they could look at the evidence, and it would be in a much fairer way. But that would seem to be, to me, the only way that you're truly going to clean up these bad apples that exist, because they seem untouchable, right? The thin blue line, and they go against their own, if folks, other officers, speak out in their departments. I mean, we know there's gangs in these departments and everything else, but if you got rid of qualified immunity, I think would really go a long way to fixing that. Because there are, I'm not a type of person that's like, oh, an officer killed a Black person, and they were wrong for it. I don't operate that way. But when you look at the facts, and it's pretty obvious, right? But they're just so protected on there. So do you agree with that? Do you think something different? What's your kind of stance on qualified immunity?
Yeah, I think we need to end qualified immunity as well, and police officers should not be untouchable. They are supposed to be agents and enforcers of the law, yet the law doesn't apply to them. We need to get rid of that. I absolutely agree with you. And it allows so many abuses to continue. And then we even see where, I think it was in New York City just in the last few days or the weekend, police officer shot like an 18-year-old who was playing with a water gun. And then after it happened, what?
An orange one. I mean, it was clearly
a
toy.
It was obviously
like yellow and orange.
Yeah, like a super squirter or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, the police department came out with a picture about with some kind of a justification for water guns. And you might know better than me, Marwan, but it was something like anything that looks like a gun, we'll take it as they came up with this very strange, ridiculous legal justification. And it just shows what happens when they can get away with whatever they want.
So another question I had for you was for reparations. I don't hear a lot of candidates advocating for reparations. That's kind of a third rail conversation. And the Democrats seem to wholly be moving away from that. Like there's an attack on woke Democrats or socialist Democrats. And, we can't talk about these woke issues because that's dead on arrival and we won't get the votes and we're going to get slaughtered in the midterms and all this other good stuff. Now, I know Bernie, there are a lot of things I liked about Bernie, but I don't think he was really for reparations. So it seems like you have a divergence there. But do you have any ideas on how to pay for reparations? Because you're advocating for $30 an hour and reparations, whatever that is. I would assume that's probably in the trillions as far as what they owe foundational Black Americans. But do you have any kind of, I don't know, ideas on how to pay for that, how to even go about that?
Yeah, one way, besides the taxes and prosecution of rich people getting away with not paying their taxes, one is reduction of military spending overseas. We spend more in the military than the next 10 countries combined. There are police departments in our country that have a bigger budget than entire countries' militaries overseas. We also have way more bases, just a continuous, basically unofficial occupation of countries that we're even supposedly allies with. So if we start to close some of those bases, do we need a base in Japan? I mean, they're an ally, right? So there's a lot of countries like that where let's close the bases, let's bring troops home, spend less money on that, take care of our veterans, and then that would also free up a lot of money that could be used, for example, for something like reparations. And this kind of we need to not focus on that stuff, or arguments like we need to people need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and why would we give handouts and this kind of thing. Like, aside from all of that, I don't
didn't
agree
own
with
slaves.
yeah, that kind of thing. And like, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And like the bootstraps thing, that phrase was originally intended to be ironic because it's not possible. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps because you're standing on them and you can't do it. And then additionally, one
even
last
to
thing,
a point,
go
ahead. Well, to a point to that, the slavers didn't build anything. They had, like if you go down and look at the actual plantations and learn about the actual architecture of the South, those guys didn't do a damn thing. They sat around and made other people build it for them. So like there's the people who are going around saying you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps didn't even build the houses that they lived in. So it's like, kid, that whole thing is a myth, an American myth that needs to go out the door. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sean,
but
what's so
also
important? Go ahead, Rebecca.
It's a debt that's owed. We talk about, why is it so people we can't cancel a credit card debt, or not credit, student debt, because they signed up for that and so they should have to pay it back. Well, okay, why doesn't that apply to reparations?
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, we don't worry about that one. That's a financial obligation that we don't need to worry about. No, I don't think so. So it's a contract.
Yeah.
And it must be honored and kept. That's what I think. And yeah, go ahead, Marwan.
And like
I was just gonna say,
Haiti's still
yeah.
living at the after effects of the debt that it had to pay because Haiti was forced to pay France for its freedom. Like I think Rebecca's dead on with reparations. I think it's important that we focus on issues like reparations because for me, it's a way to get out this part of American history that's really glossed over. The number of people who were enslaved, the misery they went through, the fight for freedom that the enslaved people went through. Even like it's glazed over how 400,000 of the enslaved people left the South to go join the Union in the fight, or 400,000. It's a huge number, which drew W.E. Du Bois describes it as a general strike. Like any number of these things are a reason to compensate our fellow man who we've just decimated in the most awful of ways. So I think Rebecca's dead on. And I had a recent trip to Louisiana, which really a lot of this sunk in for me. So I love hearing people talk about it right now.
Well, what I appreciate, Rebecca, is all the questions, and we have a lot more in the chat. Mark would join us, but he can't, so he's typing them in the chat. So we'll go through them one on one here in a second. But you haven't dodged any questions, and so I really appreciate that from you, because that just seems like the standard operating for politicians, and it's so frustrating. And reporters won't hold them to task and say, "No, answer the question." I almost feel like they shouldn't even have a voice if they're not going to answer the question that was asked. That's the first
Exactly.
rule that you can change when you go. That'd be awesome. But let's get into
That
this
would be
chat
great.
here. So Mark asks, does she consider herself a progressive, and does she want to caucus with them, AOC, etc.?
Yeah, I consider myself a progressive, and I would, maybe formally or informally caucus with members of the squad. I also think, we have the Progressive Caucus in Congress, and there are members of it who are very corporate funded, and they also belong to other caucuses that are conservative, caucuses. So I think we need an additional caucus separately that there's other candidates running in the state who are aligned with me on the issues, Stephanie Gallardo and Jason Call. And we've talked about maybe forming a caucus and welcoming other people to it. And it might be small, 10 people, but 10, 15 people, and very principled. And then I would say where I'm different from maybe just kind of progressive is I believe that the root of a lot of our problems is our economic system of capitalism, where the entire economy and society is structured to generate profit. We don't grow food to feed people or build houses to house people. We grow food to make money, profit, and build houses to make profit. We actually, I believe, we have all of this amazing. So how else we have all this abundance around us? We have so much technology and automation, and yet it creates so much scarcity. How can we have empty homes and yet we have homeless people, and we have so much food, so much gets thrown away, and yet people are hungry? Our economy is structured to benefit the very wealthy few and not the public as a whole. So that might be how I would differ from some progressives who might not take that angle of looking at economics.
All right. So there are more of you just joining us. We are interviewing Rebecca Parsons. She is running for U.S. Congress. Was that is that District 6?
Yeah.
District 6. And so thank you for joining us. And she is answering our questions right now. So thanks for tuning in. We're going to get back to it. Mark says the Supreme Court many years ago determined that law enforcement is not responsible for public safety. How do we finally fix this?
I think this is an area ripe for federal legislation. Qualified immunity stems from the 11th Amendment and a very conservative reading of American case law. It's the notion that your sovereign is immune from being punished for their bad acts, which for me, even as anti-democratic as our Constitution is, doesn't really jive with the democracy that we even have. So I would like to see some federal legislation on this. Do you think that's doable, Rebecca?
Yeah, that's what I would support as well. And also a fundamental redesigning of law enforcement, where right now it's primarily about protecting property and not people. And in particular, the property of the very wealthy. So why, I mean, yeah, try to, I don't know why words are failing me right now, but yeah, I would support federal legislation on that. And then in particular, actually law enforcement does have the duty to protect public safety, and public safety means that, a woman can walk down the street without being afraid for her safety, or, an African-American person can walk down the street without worrying about their safety. And it's about people being out living their lives, and not so much about, oh, well, there's an empty mall and some kids were breaking in. Like, which is more important? Somebody's, bodily integrity and safety, or, a broken window of an abandoned building. And we need to rethink the way policing and enforcement is done to protect people. And it's not to say that private, somebody's home should not be safe. And I've had, especially over the last couple of years, really a lot of issues with, I almost got carjacked. I have had license plates stolen, cars stolen, just constant, in particular, like last summer. So I get it, but we do need to think about law enforcement in terms of people and their safety as paramount.
Absolutely. Another comment here. In the cases of Deshawney versus Winnebago and town of Castle Rock versus Gonzales, the Supreme Court has ruled that police agencies are not obligated to provide protection to citizens.
I'm not familiar with that, but that sounds about right. And it points to one issue in particular I have with the Supreme Court. It needs to be expanded. We currently have 9 justices, and the size of the Supreme Court has changed 7 times in history before. So it's not a radical, unprecedented idea to expand the court. And the reason there are 9 right now is there were 9 circuits in the U.S., and each justice would the cases in that that got appealed and had to go to the Supreme Court from an area like from Idaho in the one circuit, it'll go to the judge who's, oversees that circuit, right? But now there's 13. So there's even, you could say, kind of an administrative reason to have to expand the Supreme Court. But then also it is so unrepresentative of the country, so much more conservative than the country is, that, expand the court, have term limits. I don't think it makes any sense to have appointments for life. I mean, we say that we had the American Revolution to get away from monarchy and kings, and yet we have people who get appointed for life, essentially just sitting there on their judicial throne. So, I'm not familiar with those cases, but it does point to some changes that the Supreme Court needs, in my opinion.
That was my question for you, Rebecca. Is I believe there shouldn't be lifetime appointments and there should be term limits. As we progress as a country, I shouldn't even use the word progress since it's a trigger, but we're intellectually honest here. But as we progress as a nation, ideologies are going to change, and lifetime appointments, it doesn't work. Is that something that we can even change? Can we, the people, change that?
Yeah, we could. Right now, there's no incentive to, but it is something that we could and should, in my opinion. And we also have, I think we see with the crises that we're facing right now, climate change, the economy, even before the pandemic, we were headed for a recession. And some people thought we were overdue, quote unquote, for a recession. And it had been the longest. Anyway, our economy was headed for that anyway. Then we had the pandemic. Now it's almost certainly going to happen. And then we still have the pandemic health crisis, who just raised the alert level on monkeypox. And yet we have this government that is unwilling or unable to face these challenges and do something about them. We have people who've been in Congress for over half a century and are operating on politics as if it were still half a century ago. Like we need to have, they're protecting the filibuster and all these administrative trickery and parliamentary rules instead of just addressing the issues. So, like Dianne Feinstein, who's in her late 80s, I believe, and has been in there for decades upon decades upon decades. And yes, we absolutely, I think, need term limits. It's good to get some fresh blood in there. And then also, we could expand Congress itself. There's 435 people in the House right now, 100 in the Senate. But if you look at that proportionally, I mean, this district, if I won, I would be representing about 700,000 people. That's a lot. If you look at other countries, other democracies, they'll have their representative representing much fewer people. And it makes more sense as well. Like, I mean, I love this district and I love all the different communities and towns, but these are areas that are very different from each other in some ways and alike in others. But I mean, you have like Nia Bay, Aberdeen, Tacoma, Bainbridge Island, Bremerton, the Olympic Peninsula, Kitsap County, Gig Harbor, unincorporated Pierce County, all of these places together in one district, 700,000 people. And I think it would make sense to expand the size and have representatives representing a smaller number of people and term limits.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think Mark's getting at some root issues with his comments in our Constitution, and we've kind of been dancing around it, but it is let's be honest, that's an outdated document drafted before 1800 by a bunch of property owners who had a vested interest in making sure that they could continue to own property. One of those pieces of property included humans. So like, let's start being honest about this document and look at it, and it doesn't quite apply to our modern world where things like abortion can happen, where like the advances we've made in industry, medicine, education, communication is far outstripped what our Constitution can contemplate. And there's even some recent Fourth Amendment cases where you have like when Antonin Scalia was still alive, him kind of wrap his head around how could a government agent even put a GPS on a carriage way back in the 1800s? If that's the kind of mental juggling our judges are going through to find out like what would be a reasonable way to enforce a right to privacy, I think that in and of itself, if that's the question that's being asked, the bigger issue is like, why are we even using like stagecoaches as a reference point for how we want to govern our modern society? So I would call for a constitutional convention where a new plebiscite, a new generation gets to sit down and write out a constitution that suits its own needs. But that I can understand that would be really radical right now.
So we'll take a few more questions. What is her small business? What is her small business? What is it, and what happens to it if she wins? That's a good question.
If I won, I would just close it. It's not even an issue of putting it into a blind trust or anything. I would just end the business. And I help businesses get more customers. So I do things like writing emails for them, newsletters, ads, the text on websites. I've helped companies in all different areas, like educational companies, like personal coaches, all kinds of different stuff. But yeah, and I've been working from home since before the pandemic, like 5 or 6 years now. So yeah, that's what my small business is. And it's people ask, well, how could she afford to pay $30 per hour? Like, I'm lucky that I don't have any physical costs. You know, when you work online, it's a very high profit margin. So I understand it's a different situation that I'm in. And that's why I think, like, I don't think the only businesses out there should be the ones with such a high profit margin, because then we just wouldn't have restaurants and hair salons and stuff like that. And that's stuff that we want to go to. It's a vital part of the community. So those industries where there's a 5% or 10% profit margin, we still need them and want them. And so that's where I think the government needs to subsidize raising the minimum wage.
I like that. Joe says, what do we think about a constitutional convention to take a fresh look at everything? And then she says, ha, exactly my question, John. So you address that. All right.
The founders left us a good roadmap in the Declaration of Independence. When you really try and work with your government and they continue not to deliver for you, it's okay to start exploring other alternatives. And they make it clear that you got to try with your current government. But from a voter, it's nice to hear Rebecca up here giving me options to vote for. When I often hear either you vote for Derek Kilmer or we're going to get fascists. And it's like, well, how am I a free person if those are my two options? Like, my issue is government's not working for me, not my, yeah, you get the point. But I like where
Yeah, I think something else we could look at is direct democracy, which we have in the form, we don't have it at the national level, but we do have it at the local and state in a way where you put forth initiatives, like whole Washington is doing an initiative for statewide healthcare. And in the housing panel, we talked about initiatives for social housing. So essentially what you're doing there is asking voters to vote on policy instead of for candidates. And we could have more of that where instead of like sending, you vote for somebody once every 2 years or every 4 years, and then you just beg them to listen to you for once and support the things that you want. What if instead you were voting on issues and it was like, okay, as a community, we have decided that, or as a country even, have decided that this is going to be the federal minimum wage, and the representatives are there to just implement it. They figure out how to make that happen, and the rules and the bureaucratic stuff and the agencies and all of the administrative stuff, but they're not actually deciding the policy. The people decide the policy. And if you wanted more information about that, you could look at Mike Gravel. He recently passed away, Senator Gravel. He wrote a book about this idea of direct democracy and how it could be done in the US. So that's another option. Why not have the people decide on policy?
Mhm. That sounds novel. Joe asked a question: what can be done to end the Electoral College? Rebecca, do you support that, and how could you work toward making it happen?
Yes, I do support getting rid of it. Part of the reason we have an electoral college is because it was the distances that had to be traveled over stagecoaches. So you have these votes, and then you send somebody. It takes them a while to go across, the colonies, and then they get to the central area, and then they cast their vote. And right now, we don't need that anymore. So yes, I do support getting rid of the electoral college, and supporting that by promoting a constitutional convention.
I love it. This is a fantastic conversation. I'm going to put your website up so people can learn more about you there. Again, you.
On if I can bring up a point about ballot initiatives, I'm working on whole Washington now, and the goal is to get 400,000 signatures by December. We need to get 400,000 by December 2022 to get on the ballot. And that is a ridiculous number of signatures. And if you follow what happened to Matthew Ho, was it in North Carolina, where he was arbitrarily taken off the ballot, and he still had to gather an inordinate amount of signatures to get on the ballot. That's a problem. Like, there's this notion of we can do these direct democracy things, but some of the barriers to get on the ballot are obscene. Like in England, you can get on the ballot for a couple $100 and an endorsement from your party, I believe. But here, if you're not a Democrat or Republican, you got to get thousands of signatures, and you might get kicked off the ballot by a partisan party. Have you experienced that, Rebecca? And do you have any ideas for helping out with that?
Here, I know about kind of the congressional level because I've heard from other candidates around the country what they face. It is nice here where I can get on the ballot in one of two ways: either gather signatures or pay a fee. And it's 1% of the salary. So I think the salary's $180,000. So then I could either gather 1,800 signatures or pay $1,800 to get on the ballot. I chose the payment because I didn't want to open the risk of any kind of political maneuvering to invalidate signatures and try to get me off the ballot. But yeah, there's such a high barrier with signatures that are required. That's not something I've thought about in particular, like what particular laws could I co-sponsor or sponsor on that. But I do agree that it's a big issue. And yeah, like that Green Party candidate in North Carolina, they invalidated some of his signatures. There was a case with a brand new Congress progressive candidate, Anthony, I can't remember his last name, but he was running in Illinois. And where he had gathered signatures, and then the opponent Democrat, went around, sent people around door to door to ask people to remove their signatures. And yeah, there's all kinds of nonsense that goes on with that. But here, in terms of it's open in some ways, like what I mentioned, but there's other ways where the Democratic Party will try to narrow what's possible. One way, for example, was the state party in this election cycle. The chair of the state party sent down a directive to the local, county, and legislative district parties to do early endorsements. So they did. And what they ended up doing was just holding a vote. Should we endorse the incumbent? Yes, we should. Great, vote done. I was never invited to this, never invited to speak or to the meeting or to fill out a questionnaire, never, didn't even consider me. And then the canvassing software that is used is called VAN, and that's what most Democratic campaigns use. And then the state party said, well, you need to get access to that, like any incumbent Democrat does. You have to have 50% plus one of the local parties in your district endorse you. But we implemented this early endorsement policy where they endorse your opponent without even considering you. So, wow, what a coincidence. You're not going to get the endorsements. You need to get the software. So in Washington State, it is a little bit more open in some ways, but then the establishment will always find another way to try to keep their hold on power.
No, I've got one. Oh, go ahead. Jeff has a question. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I've been a little distracted here, but yeah, just
You're
on
all
the
good.
van thing, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, on the van thing, I just had to put in my 2 cents because I hate Van. It's a private corporation owned by the Clintons. It's designed specifically to target ads towards Hillary Clinton voters, and that's all it's useful for. I would urge everybody to build their own grassroots Democratic based thing, but I understand how that does set you back, cause a little disadvantage for you not being able to even reach the list of Democrats that they have.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is an option. A guy called John Culver in Washington State who he designed the Burn app during Bernie's campaign. If you ever went to a Bernie event or watched something online and to be like, now take your phone out and go to the Burn app and download the Burn. Yeah, he made that. And he made a Washington State version basically, and it's free. It's called getoutthedamnvote.com. And his email address is on the site. So this could actually be great for anybody watching who's thinking, well, I want to do an initiative in my town or city or county for housing. You
Like
could
us.
go to getoutthedamnvote.com and create a free account and email John and tell him what you want to use it for. He's very friendly and he'll add in, questions for you and stuff like that. And the voter file of every registered voter in the state is free, and you can get it from the Secretary of State. So you just get that free file, and then, or John can just get it for you. And then you can, it has a lot of great different features. So for one example, you could decide that you want to canvass a particular neighborhood. So like, okay, I'm just going to draw, a circle around this area or around this little, subdivision, and go to every house there or every Republican or Democrat or whoever there. Or you could say, I'm going to go to the farmer's market and just talk to people. And then when you ask, let's say you have a friendly conversation and then you ask for the voter's name, Sally Jones, and then you can put their info in and find her, you can find her voter record and then put in what you talked about and whether she supports it or not and her phone number so you can follow up. So it's a great tool. And yeah, we should really get away from NGP because I used them in my last campaign in 2020. I just had to pay a lot of money for it. I also had to pay thousands of dollars for data that I wouldn't have if I were the incumbent. But it, I gathered a lot of data, including like all the people who told our volunteers that they would vote for me. And this cycle, I decided not to use NGP, but I want NGP to give me that data that we gathered, like the data that I paid for thousands of dollars and also gathered. And they have been refusing to give it to me. They're just ignoring. At first they were responding and now they're just ignoring my emails. And they're sitting withholding my data. It's my data. So yes, I absolutely agree that we need to get away from these corporate.
And that just confirms my feeling that they're there for gathering everybody else's data but not sharing it back. And yeah, so that's sorry to hear that.
Yeah, they need to text more people to vote more and donate more to protect Roe, even though they're not protecting Roe. It's insanity. I mean, Is that, I actually had a question about this on Roe. Like, I look at Kilmer, he's been in the House for 12 years, and now he's asking me for my vote to go protect Roe. It's like, what the hell did you do for the last 12 years? Like, do you have any? Yeah, I'm sick of this stuff. I don't even have a question.
It's the most important election in our lifetime. If the Republicans win, then we won't have Roe. And now it happened. And now they're doing the same thing. They're using the same text. It's like, what happened last time? We did it, and now it's gone. And so now you're going to send us text saying Roe's at stake? It's not at stake. It's gone thanks to you not trying to protect it enough. And it's like, there's so much they could be doing to protect reproductive freedom and reproductive rights right now, and they're not. And it's like, well, we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. What do you want us to do? It's very frustrating. Yeah.
In that regard, how have you been talking to voters who bring up the concern about you versus Kilmer and this notion that if we don't vote for the Democratic incumbent, we're going to get swarmed by fascists? How have you been addressing that? Because that's actually a concern of mine sometimes. Like, I've been raised to vote for I was raised to vote for Democrats no matter what. And like, changing that mindset has been kind of hard. And yeah, I'd like to hear your perspective on how it's been going.
Yeah, well, a lot of voters don't realize that we have a top two system. And so they're used to thinking about the congressional election as if it were presidential, where you vote red or blue. Those are the only options. And if you don't vote for the one you think is most likely to win, you could get the one you don't want. But in Washington State, with our congressional elections, it's the top two vote getters who go through to the general. So you could vote for me, and then Kilmer as the incumbent, almost certainly going to be in the general. But then I could be in the general as well, and then it would be a Democrat versus Democrat. So in the general, you would have two Democrats to choose from. And that has happened before. It happened in the 9th district, right next to us in Federal Way area. That happened in 2018. There were two Democrats. Both of them, last name was Smith, so it was very confusing for people. But yeah, that's what it could be, because of our system here. So there's no risk. And also this district in particular has, it's called the Cook PVI report. It rates how the partisan leaning of districts. And ours used to be D+6. So it's like, I think that 6 percentage points more Democratic than the average congressional district. And now it's D+10. So it's gotten more Democratic. And it's also been Democratic for over 50 years, including during prior Republican waves. People are saying Democrats are going to lose the midterms. It's going to be a bloodbath for Democrats. Well, that happened in the 90s as well, when Newt Gingrich took over. And this district stayed blue. So there's no risk, in my opinion.
That's helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Our final question. During the election season last year, I interviewed the mayor and his opponent and several other candidates. And a few of them told me, let's swing back and connect if I win, which kind of let me know that they weren't really going to be doing much work on the other side if they lost. If you don't win, are you still going to be advocating for these platforms? Or what does life look like for you on the other side?
Yeah, absolutely. After the last election in 2020, when I lost, I went on to co-found a group called Tacoma Housing Now, and we did activism around homelessness. We did things like we had members of our coalition, our group, who were homeless, and they told us trash was a big issue. And the city not providing any trash service. So we rented 2 big trucks, and we went to the encampments around town, picked up all the trash and dumped it in front of City Hall to make a point. And then lo and behold, they were able to pick it up very quickly. And then they started providing trash service to the camps. And that's what I like doing, that kind of thing. You really get a direct, immediate result. And it also makes people feel so empowered, because aside, all this trash is so unhygienic, and these mountains of trash in their camps. So that fixed a real problem. But then it also had the political effect of they started providing trash service at camps. And it was also empowering because for the people in the camps, like, oh, we can take charge and be part of this. And we're part of the group and we're making the decisions. But then also homeless people from elsewhere in town would be like, sometimes we would go to camps and they'd be like, "Oh, did you hear about those people who picked up the trash and dumped it in front of City Hall? Like, I couldn't believe they did that." And I was like, yeah, that was us. Do you want to do it with us again? And so for people who are used to being ignored, it's very empowering. And then for people who are sick, maybe they're not homeless, but are sick of feeling so disempowered with the system. Like nothing happens, nothing good comes out of the Senate. Everything is gridlocked. It's like, well, we can get together and we can peacefully occupy an empty public building and turn it into housing, or we can pick up trash. We can do these things and put pressure. So that's what I would be interested in, continuing to do that kind of thing if I lose. And if I win, I think, yeah, either
it's
way.
on. If you win, it's on.
I mean, that's great because there's a long tradition in American history of just that. Like, that's no different to me than people sitting at lunch counters in the civil rights era to start, to protest an unjust law, to start getting the rights that they rightly deserve. So I think that you want to do that both in office and out of office is fantastic.
Well, we got the idea from the Young Lords, who were a Puerto Rican group in New York City who provided community services like the Black Panthers, but for their community. And so, yeah, there's a lot of inspiration. People, you look back at our history, a lot of inspiring stuff.
All right. So check out RebeccaParson.com for more information. And now we're going to get to the other side of our show. And Rebecca, you are hanging out with us for a little bit. Is that true?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So as you know, we cover the city council meetings on Wednesday. Jeff and I will have a discussion. He's actually downtown right now. And I'm going to just forward his slides as he created this. So Jeff, why don't you jump in there and just kind of guide us through here?
Yeah, well, let me ask you: do you want to do the city council roundup, or do you want to do the discussion on Martin
Let's do
v.
the
Boise?
discussion because you have people there.
Yeah, so if you can pull up the other PowerPoint.
There's another PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, where'd you send that to me at?
That should be in the same directory, or you want me to try to pull it up?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay, let me see if I can do this.
I mean, I'm good. I would get there eventually.
How's that? Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can.
Let me slow this.
There you go. Everybody can see it.
You got it? Good.
Yep.
I can't see anybody else, so you have to tell me to stop anytime. So just an introduction to what's been going on ML King Way down here. I think the best way to start is with the citizen comments. And now I'm thinking I'm going to have to pass it back to you. Do you have the citizen comments ready there, or do you want me to pull those up? I can find them.
No, I do not have
I've got them
ready. You got them? Go ahead.
It's
you know how to share your screen there?
I don't.
Yeah,
so
right.
there's a little button at the bottom. Sean is going to come on a lot more, so I might as well teach him now.
He's
there's
good,
a square with an arrow there, and that'll allow you to share your screen.
All right.
Should be next to your camera and your mic. And Jeff, go ahead and pull it up as a backup. It's always good to have redundancies in place.
Yeah, I gotta get in.
Can you see it on my screen still?
And I still see your PowerPoint.
Oh, you still see my PowerPoint? Mm-hmm. Okay. Hold on.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able
way,
to do it.
If there are any volunteers out there that want to help us with this show, like doing some background work, I think this would be a great community project. But let me try to share this again.
I make it look pretty easy as a one-man show, huh?
I know.
It's pretty crazy. A lot.
Okay, now I'm hoping you'll be able to hear the sound on this though when I play it. So,
Can you see my screen? Did it work? Sharing a tab.
Yep, I see. I have two screens for Jeff, but I don't have yours, Sean.
Okay.
Oh, actually, that is yours. That is yours, Sean. This is Sean's screen here. Go ahead and play it, Sean.
Public recognition provides an opportunity for attendees to address. As noted on the agenda, public recognition provides an opportunity for attendees to address the council on any city-related item that is not already listed on tonight's agenda. Please raise your hand to be recognized. We only ask that you state your name for use on the record and you limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. A timer system will be used so that everyone is treated fairly. With that, I open public recognition. And Christy Lyson is recognized.
I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. This is the time I can comment on anything that's not part of the agenda, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So just general community concerns.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start by saying I know many of you already, but I've owned my home in downtown Bremerton for 27 years. And so I'm a long-term member of the community. I'm a bit concerned that I feel like the council and the city government the house is on fire basically, and y'all are talking about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. First of all, in terms of affordable housing, we do not have affordable housing, and none of the things I heard on the plans and the projects in process for affordable housing are going to change that. The basic rent, and I think it's basically every landlord has decided what the allowance is for the military to get housing here. There's a boat in, and so no matter what apartment it is, it starts at $1,800 a month. You have to show that you make 3 times that amount in income to even be eligible to rent that apartment, which means you have to make $70,000+ a year to afford the most basic apartment in Bremerton right now. I hire people all the time. I wish I could hire people. I can't even get people to staff the jobs I have, which require at minimum a bachelor's degree and more often a master's degree. We pay for those starting level positions $55,000 to $65,000 a year. So I can't even pay people enough they can afford a studio or 1-bedroom apartment in Bremerton right now. And that's for people with, those are professionals I'm hiring. So, and that's not even talking about the homeless in our community, which are in dire need of the most basic decency provided for just their basic needs, and who fall through the cracks for any homeless shelter program, just any kind of decent treatment in our city. This is a crisis, people, and I'm telling you, stop paying developers to develop housing here that supposedly is going to be affordable. If it's $1,800 a month, it's not affordable. It's not affordable. That's $70,000 is upwards of $34 an hour. Name how many positions in our city pay $34 an hour. I just want to present a reality check. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments and taking the time to contact us. Anyone else for public recognition? Brian Anderson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I just wanted to make 2 brief comments real fast to the City Council. I sent you all an email around 4th of July. I'm concerned about the degree and scale of fireworks that were going off. It seemed like the city made a very intentional decision not to enforce some of the ordinances that are already in place. And I do understand that there's a lot of pent-up energy and excitement. People have been locked up at home for a couple years, so maybe there was more 4th of July fireworks this year than normal. But my biggest concern is I think this is kind of a ticking time bomb, no pun intended, in terms of just like an ecological disaster. Bremerton is surrounded by timberlands. It just takes one firework or spark to set off a huge forest fire. I think I sent a drone video of the degree of fireworks going off all at the same time, and it was truly mind-boggling. So I would really urge the city council, the power to I did reach out. I live in Evergreen, at a minimum 50 years old, and they're part of the scarce urban canopy that we have left in equity concerns that desperately needed in Bremerton, which is a community with a lot of low-income folks who don't have AC.
To the speakers who are
Bremerton, which is up the sidewalk. And I do appreciate that we care. Okay, I live in Manette, and
6:48.
There were about 4 old-growth evergreen trees. And I don't know if there's any heat islands in the city. There are many studies that have shown that. So I don't know if there's any consideration of some sort of ordinances to protect trees or committees, but I think that's something that's desperately needed in Bremerton, which is a community with a lot of low-income folks who don't have AC.
Thank you, Brian. You're at time, but I will just tell you that both issues that you brought up, we are actively talking about with committees and things like that. So
thank you so much.
I'll just say the city council is more active on some things than others.
We'll move forward. So.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, next is Marwan Cameron.
Good evening, Council. Marwan Cameron. Good evening, Mayor. From the Conduit, I had 2 things I wanted to talk about this evening. The first one is downtown on MLK. Talking with folks down there and other people that are stakeholders that care about those folks down there are wondering what can be done in regards to placing bathrooms downtown and dumpsters downtown so that they have a place to put their garbage. Folks are ready to mobilize and provide staffing through volunteer so that folks can feel safe down there. But as far as we know, nothing like that has happened yet downtown, and that hasn't been tried. So I'd love to hear, what is going to happen. I know that coming up, there are some organizations that are going to have day shelters going on, but that may be a year and a half out. So what are we going to do in the interim? So that was my first issue. My second issue is in regards to the ARPA funds and the CDBG grant. And
okay, so that I just thought those were 2. I thought your statement was very well stated, obviously, and also the other woman that spoke. But so the next day, the mayor responded. The mayor responded by sending down a police force and taking away everybody's stuff, throwing away all their stuff, and I was just shocked. I had a call, so I wanted to let you hear from a witness, someone who was there. This is Wendy, a good friend of mine down here, and I just wanted to let her kind of tell you what she witnessed that morning. I'll let you talk to her. Or do you want to sit there? Yeah.
Hello. Here.
Hello. How are you?
Hi. Good. Good to see
Good
you
to
again.
see you again, Wendy.
Hi.
Yeah.
So, that morning we had come down, which we usually come down every morning and visit, my friends down here. I consider them family. And there was a small, kind of like a dump truck bed. You know what I mean? And I saw them, and they just started coming around and taking people's stuff. And there was a policeman at the end of the driveway down here, and he was checking all the license plates. Because I think you're only 2-hour parking here, and also wanted to make sure that everybody had tabs and everything like that. But I just couldn't believe it, and I told them, I said, hey, you guys cannot do that. These are people's lives. This is the only thing that they have. and they just were picking up mats and blankets and sleeping bags and tents and everything. It was not a good sight.
Can you? And this hasn't been the first time. We met a couple weekends ago because we were doing a barbecue down there, and
Yes.
when we were setting up, they were arresting people. Can you speak to just some other things that you've experienced down there, or other folks that have experienced?
Well, I know that for my boyfriend and I, we each got a $107 ticket for setting up a tent. And what was the name of that park up there, Dan? Forest Ridge Park. And I knew about the Boise versus Martin law. And they continued to ticket us for storing our belongings on public property. Well, storing means to put it away for another time, like at a storage unit, right? You rent it, you put things away for another time. I was going to use it because I have narcolepsy and am very tired and I need to lay down during the day. And you can't do that here in a vehicle on property at the Salvation Army. You can't even be in your vehicle during the day. You have to be off property. So we got a ticket and went from one officer to what, about 4 or 5? Yeah, 5 officers there who told us if we didn't pick up things right now, we were going to jail.
So, Wendy, you were saying this
So
ticket is $107. How often are they ticketing you? Is this a daily thing, or is it a week if you haven't, moved, or how does that work? Do you know?
I don't know. We picked up and moved right then and there.
Okay.
I, with my disability and stuff, I can't, go to jail and do those kinds of things. I have what's called cataplexy, where it's all my muscles give out over emotional things, like a marionette puppet. And they cut the strings and I collapse on the ground. In fact, I had one the day they were confiscating everyone's things here Thursday. I was just so emotional that they were just taking everybody's stuff, backpacks, everything. You know, um, I know I've been housed for a year and a half now, and I know that when you're out here, you're constantly asked to be moved. You move here, you move out of this building for lunch, you have to leave a half an hour early, and afterwards you have to wait an hour to come back in. And you're constantly moving and asking to take your things with you. And when they come and they take your things away, you know, it's like your very soul is ripped from you. You never have anything. You never have a place to even call your own, even if it's just a bench, or leaning up against the wall here and trying to stay cool because the homeless need to have protection during the summer as much as they do the winter. It's hot out here, you know? And I don't know. It's just, I just really feel for.
Sean, Rebecca, do you have questions or comments for Wendy? Thank you so much, Wendy.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I have a question more specifically about Bremerton, but in general, Wendy, I often hear people say, like, talk about homeless folks as though it's like a lifestyle choice of like they're choosing to live on the streets. Like in Bremerton, do you feel like that's the case, or do you feel like you have no options if you're on the street? I think it's more
Well,
you have no
how
options
people
so
get
you're on the
here,
street.
there are many different types of homelessness.
Yeah.
Some of us, I just got my disability in June. It took me 3 years. And the only money I was able to get was the $197 that you get from DSHS on a program called ABD, Age, Blind, and Disabled.
Yeah.
And when you get your disability, you have to pay that back. But so what do you do with $197? Where do you go?
Yeah.
I'm originally from Snohomish County over there. And Everett, I'll tell you, it was scary. I have family over here on this side, so I thought, okay, I'll come over here. And it's not as scary over here, excuse me, than it is over there. I have to say that there are some really, really good people out here. All of them are really good. We all have things that we need to work on, you know. And we just need to realize that everybody is human. We all deserve to have a home. Whether it's a tiny home, living in a trailer, in a park where it's fenced. I mean, we have so many state parks that are closed down, that if we could take one of those, fence it in to keep people out so that the homeless would be protected. Because a lot of people don't like the homeless. They want to put us aside so we're not seen or heard. But there are bathrooms there. There are showers already there. You know, they could pay a portion of their disability or whatever money they have coming in. It could be on a sliding fee scale. There's so many options.
Yeah,
I like those ideas,
there
Rebecca.
are.
Yeah, Wendy, I was wondering if
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
No, I can't hear anybody. Did I do something?
Can you hear me, Sean or Jeff?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I can hear
Okay.
Wendy too.
Hello.
Can you hear us, Jeff?
Yeah.
All right, while Jeff is getting that together, Rebecca, why don't you say what you're going to say, and we'll
Let's
just
see.
repeat it
Here?
when
Oh,
we
there it
goes
is.
back on. Can you hear us?
Yeah, my question was if if you're Wendy or Jeff, are you seeing a lot of new people around who are homeless, like for the new in the last few months, or homeless for the first time?
That's a good question, Rebecca. Sounds like they're still sorting that out. I think there's a false narrative there is a false narrative about homeless people that it's a choice, which I think we should start combating.
I'm just typing this into the chat for Jeff and Wendy. You'll get it there. Jeff, I can call you on the phone too, if that will help. Or he might have pulled the cord out. That's what it looks like. Like you said, technology in the field. It's always a lot of fun. All right, so we'll let him get that. Yeah, what I was saying earlier, Rebecca and Sean, my agency went downtown we used to feed folks downtown pre-COVID, and then COVID hit. We had access to a soup kitchen downtown, and we'd go out to the tribe, and we could get these 3-foot salmon for $1, and my cook would smoke them or brine them one day, smoke them, and then serve them Sunday on actual plates with real silverware. They can come and dine. They didn't have to eat in styrofoam. They didn't have to hurry up and rush. Put on jazz music, and that's what we did every Sunday until COVID hit. Then COVID hit, we transitioned to outdoors. Then other agencies started doing food service every day because we only did it on Sundays. And then when the pandemic hit, we switched to Thursdays. And so now on Thursdays, because we have a transportation company, we just deliver meals to folks who are food insecure throughout the county. But that was it really helped. But there were folks that would say, hey, it's a duplication of effort. And, they're already being fed at Salvation Army. And it's like, well, what a privileged statement to say. It's like when I'm hungry, I walk over to my refrigerator and I have a snack and I might have eaten an hour ago, right? Because I'm hungry. and I want some food. And so just trying to, I think it's, I don't understand how it's so difficult for people to put themselves into someone else's shoes. Uh, just seems so difficult. So it looks like we have a new person coming on.
Yeah, hopefully, can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay, I'm going to give it to this gentleman.
All right.
How you doing today, folks?
We're doing fine. How are you?
Pleasure to serve your country. Back when I was a young man, I'm 42 now. So go ahead, shoot away.
Well, just give us your experience. We would like to hear from you.
I've been off and on in Bourbonton for 30 years. My family is four different families. The smaller family is not really wanting to be involved in the other three larger families. I come from the Carter family. There's a Norwegian family. It's a very large Norwegian family here, and their last name is hard to spell. And Sarah Burks, who died years ago. The Burks family is another family that's part of my family, and they own like half of Bourbonton. Some of these properties here that are businesses, the businesses are still trying to buy the property and renting right now from my family, the Burks side of the family. Our mayor really screwed up, really bad. He was saving up money. He saved up to $1 million to help the homeless here before he decided to tried to kick us out over to Seattle and Tacoma, and got the middle finger from Seattle and Tacoma. They didn't want his money, so he could force us out of here, because Seattle, Tacoma are overpopulated, just like Bourbonton is. There's 1,600 of us here, and the only ones that I know are down here. I want to know who the other people are so I could try to help them out. I was a homeless advocate for New Horizons Ministries and Peace on the Streets for the kids on the streets. The person that created Peace on the Streets for the kids on the streets, her name was Elena. She was the founder, and she was the owner of the drop-in center. She actually retired from being a drop-in center owner for the kids and people that were almost the age of 25. I've been a homeless advocate most of my life. I've done counseling stuff. I've done all that, and I did everything for free. I wasn't one of these advocates who expects money. But anyway, the mayor, my family was the one that paid for his campaign, like almost $4 million. The man turns around and he says he's going to help the homeless. He puts on his page, he has $1 million saved up. The guy who built Marvin William Recreational Center, seeing it on the mayor's page, he was searching around for funds, and he called the mayor and he convinced the mayor to let him have the funds to put a recreational center up. So $1 million was stolen by a man who decided to put a $2 million building up across from Salvation Army to help the black folk. Us people pretty much that are considered white or even European, like me, don't even look black. We asked to use the bathroom, and they're like, no, you're pretty much saying you're not black. Get out of here. They're rude over there, inconsiderate. For instance, me and my girl and one of my sisters, we were charging our phones, and they came out through the side door and started being rude. And one of the ladies tried to start arguing with me, threatening me. And I said, ma'am, I served your country. Please don't be rude to me. I would appreciate it if you speak to me politely as an adult should talk to somebody. I'm not yelling at you. There's no reason for any screaming, yelling, and arguing with me. I don't like yelling, screaming, arguing, fighting. I don't like doing none of that. Another guy came out, started threatening me, and he's going to whip my ass, and the police would be called on me after he threatened to whip my ass. He called the police on me. I was waiting for something to happen because I guaranteed I would have dropped him. 4 years in the Army. My dad was a military man, retired lieutenant colonel. I learned stuff I shouldn't have learned. I don't like fighting because the factor it's useless for me. Hurting people is not a thing. I've seen way too much happen in this city. And the police have gotten worse and worse with us homeless. They're ruder. They're inconsiderate. They throw us in the back of a car for no reason. We could just be sitting here hanging out. right here on Salvation Army, and they'll think we're doing something wrong, and they'll ask Salvation Army, and Salvation Army's like, I don't know about it. I didn't see nothing, but if they are, just go ahead, remove them. Salvation Army has a few staff members that are really inconsiderate. They like to start arguments or pick fights. And I've been 48 hours been restricted, not being able to come back. 24-hour. I haven't got my 72. For some reason, they skip over a 24-hour with me, and they give me a 48. They haven't given me 72 yet because it's been 3-4 times, and they have never given me 72 and then told me to get the hell out and ban me. I try to explain to them I can't keep the mask constantly over my nose because I've been washboarded twice when I was captured over in Iraq, and my MOS was recon missions and rescue missions. I had my own extraction team within 5 months of being over in Iraq. I went from a private, first class private to a squad leader in 4 months, and I've had a couple incidents happen where there was. You remember when we had a few like 10 government officials go missing, and we found them in Iraq. I was the part of the 4-man extraction team that was the ones that pulled them out. One of our government officials that we were pulling out, that I was making sure got out safely, tried to hand me over to the enemy. I had to act quickly. I have almost 200 something kills under my belt, and 2 guys at the same time throat slit with one swing, and I put that government official in prison for the rest of his life because that's against the law. You can't hand over your own person who's trying to rescue you and who protects you. You know, here in Birmingham, since I've been dealing with this town, the police are just, I don't know, it's gotten out of control. We're getting arrested for no reason. Treated like we're not even civilians. I'm wanting to put a stop to that.
I really appreciate you sharing your story. We have to let Rebecca go. Rebecca,
Okay.
thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. Hope to have you back on again
Rebecca's gotta go.
in the future.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Great hearing your policies.
See you soon, hopefully. Bye.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
you guys take care. You have a wonderful day, and God bless.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question, if you don't mind, John. Do you have a comment or a response, maybe in regards to the police down there? This is 2 people now who have kind of spoke about the treatment that they've been receiving from law enforcement downtown.
And Salvation Army, just forgetting something needs to be done. Staff need to be removed. A few staff members have to be removed. Our captain is just literally, he sides with them, and then he listens to us, and then he agrees with us. He says, I'll do something about it. And the next thing you know, we're getting it told that we have to leave for 48, 24 hours. And he knows it's the truth, and he's seen it on the cameras, but he doesn't want to listen to us. He doesn't want to agree with what he's seen because he wants to side with his own staff.
Let me ask you this. What would you like to see happen? What kind of change would you like to see happen downtown? Respect.
We mind us as homeless, we mind our own business. We sit out here and like we're not doing nothing. We actually sit here and actually have conversations, and we act like a family member, like we're one big family. And we get harassed for no apparent reason. We could be over in Salvation Army on the property, like I said, the police will see us thinking we're doing something wrong, and we're just conversating. The only protection we have is Salvation Army does not allow public officials or any law enforcement to come in and look for somebody because it's against their church rules. It's like the churches here, the church rules of Salvation Army has protects us only when we're inside. If we're outside sitting on the property hanging out, then we're not protected from what's capable of happening from the inside.
Let me ask you another question. Has there been any conversations that you've had with law enforcement or public officials? Have they like come to talk and say, "Hey, how can we all work together to work
No,
on what
they refuse
exists?"
to even talk about. They refuse to talk about it. They don't want to help us. They want to throw us in jail. they want to come up with some charge that they think is reasonable enough to take us away.
And how many?
They harass us.
Yeah, how many people are living in Bremerton then, like this with
There's
you? You said
1,600 of us that are homeless
in the county or just in Bremerton
in
proper?
Kitsap County.
Okay. Wow. And you don't think, the politicians, no one from the city's come out to ask you what you want and what you'd like to see?
No, it's like we're not even civilians. We're not even normal people. They consider us criminals because we're homeless.
Yeah.
We're breaking the law just being homeless.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing.
The mayor has tried to send us to Seattle 5 times and Tacoma once.
I really do appreciate you sharing your experience with us. We definitely need to hear these stories.
Yeah.
While he is sharing
I want to have a story rewritten from the new generation of the homeless, just like they did in the like mid '80s, early '90s about Seattle. There wasn't one that was been written for Bremerton. From us, some of us that want to talk and have a book written about homeless life here in Kitsap County. And if that's done, maybe people will see how we're treated here versus Seattle. It's harder for us over here because they don't call Kitsap County Kidnap County for no reason.
Really?
We get picked up for ridiculous charges that the police want to make.
Kitsap County.
The police want to throw a charge on us because we're considered criminals being homeless, put us in jail, and then we get railroaded for something we didn't do.
You sharing your story and advocating. Does Jeff have more people that are going to speak?
No. Hey, Jeff, you got anybody else that wants to speak? All right. Here's Jeff and another person. If you want to talk to me, my name is Chris or Italian Chris, either one.
Thank you, Chris.
So, all right. I will speak to you guys some other time in the future.
Thanks, Chris.
Or come down here. Come down here to the block. We call it the block. It's right behind Monica's and Salvation Army. If you want to speak to people personally.
Absolutely. Well, Joe in the chat is saying, thank you.
Huh?
Thank you, Chris.
All right, you guys have a wonderful day, and God bless, and you're welcome for serving for your country.
God bless you. Joe in the chat is saying the sweep on Thursday reminded me that we want to organize a rapid response plan. Maybe we should be videotaping sweep events to potentially share with our legal advisors. Collect the names of the arrested and track what happens to them. Do they need bailing out? Can we help? I think both valid ideas. Jeff?
Hey there. So that's a lot, huh? A lot of good conversations. Huh?
Absolutely.
I've been kind of catching half of these conversations, realizing that there's like excellent conversations going on. So I can't wait to go back and watch a lot of this myself. But I wanted to follow up. There may be a couple other people that want to speak here, but in the meantime, I wanted to kind of show a conversation I had with the police department regarding this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me see if I can share this.
Pulling that up. What I had on the screen, everyone, is the point in time count.
Sorry.
You can go ahead and pull it up. I'm just talking while you're getting ready, so we don't have dead air. So this is the 2022 Kitsap County point in time count. You can just Google that, and it will come right up, so you don't have to search. Shout out to Anton Pressinger from Northwest Hospitality for his work on getting this done. And so you can see transitional housing, emergency shelter, unsheltered. You can see the totals over the years. And so this gives you an insight as to what's going on. It's broken down by city. The one thing that this doesn't capture, of course, because it's a point in time. So if they don't count you at that time, then you're missed. So we know these numbers are likely to be quite higher. But how much higher, you're not going to know. But this is the best that can be done right now. All right, go ahead, Jeff. Let's see. You got it down here. Let me go ahead and share your screen. Go ahead.
And I was going to lead in with this, but we had people wanted to talk, so I thought that was better.
That's perfect. People first.
So this is the Martin v. Boise, a right to exist somewhere. This is just it in a nutshell. In 2021, the Boise settled the lawsuit by agreeing to spend $1 million. Anyways, attorney's fees, and agreed to amend ordinances on public sleeping, as well as to train their police not to arrest individuals or issue citations when there's no shelter space available. Persons who are offered appropriate available shelter space but refuse to go could still be cited, which is the big loophole there, as I understand it. And I'll probably let Sean go into this, but anyways, and as the ACLU said, you're criminalizing someone for behavior that's unavoidable. Everyone has to sleep. And so like out here, basically what they've said is you're allowed to be for as far as I can see here, you're allowed to be on the sidewalk standing. I mean, when you really get down to it, you can stand there as long as you. So telling somebody that's just cruel and unusual. I mean, on its face, in my opinion. Especially when someone has narcolepsy. I mean, how awful is that? Sorry, I was gonna did you have anything to add to that for Boise, Sean?
Yeah, and I'll preface that I did go to law school and I am a licensed lawyer, so I know my way around these cases and jurisprudence. But what I have to say now is just my opinion on this case. It's an interesting case, right? Because it's out of one of our more liberal jurisdictions, the Ninth Circuit. It's authored by Judge Berzon. She's very I actually met her before. She's very nice and she's very smart and articulate. But the substance of the case is there were some homeless folks in Boise, Idaho, who essentially were left out of the shelters of Boise. It's a common fact pattern which would apply to Bremerton as well. The Boise police were arresting them for violating public camping laws. And those individuals challenged those arrests under the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. And the quote that really sums the case up for me is when Berzon says that, which is, I'll start here. She says that is, as long as there's no option of sleeping indoors, the government cannot criminalize indigent homeless people for sleeping outdoors on public property on the false premise that they had a choice in the matter. And so she's articulating a principle there that if you have no choice on being housed, you can't be arrested for it. That's criminalizing someone for not having a choice, right? But I wouldn't consider it a loophole, but where people who want to continue to arrest homeless people are going to go with this is the notion that is the idea that there's still going to be beds out there. So every cop who still wants to arrest someone is just going to go out there and say, well, there's still a bed for this person to sleep in, so they still have a choice. So because they have a choice, I can arrest them. And I think that's where you're going to see the legal battles on this case. Homeless people, to avail themselves of this section of the Eighth Amendment, are going to need to prove that within their community, there are no more homeless shelter beds for them to go to. And it's going to be like an individualized response. So I think that's where you're getting at with the loophole, right, Jeff?
Yeah, and let me go into what my conversation with Sergeant Roback.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, but I think this will get right to what you're talking about. Let's see, can you share that? Yeah, there we go. And I'll just read this in case you can't read it. This was my email to the sergeant. Dear Sergeant Roback, the other day we had a conversation relating to the enforcement of property rights, Martin v. Boise, and what is considered public areas. In our conversation, you confirmed that the only public areas within walking distance from the corner of ML King Way and Park are the sidewalks. From what you said, it sounded like the only place we are allowed to exist is in a standing position on the sidewalk. You said no tents were allowed. What forms of shelter are people allowed to set up on these sidewalks where you are allowed to be? And please don't suggest the Salvation Army or finding someone else that owns property. Where is someone without access to any property in Bremerton allowed to exist and shelter themselves in Bremerton? Okay, that was my letter to him, because I was pretty hot, and this is me being okay, being a little, but
hey, that was pretty good for being hot.
Yeah.
Very restrained.
Hold on, let me see if I can get to his response here. If
Those
I can
are some
find
pointed questions, and there's nothing wrong with that,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
We can see his response.
Yeah. Oh, you can?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, you just took it down.
Oh shoot! All right. What did I do wrong here?
If you want to put it back up, I can read it for you if you can't read it while it's up.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Come on now. Just want to view this. Okay. So, hello, Mr. Campbell. We always have to suggest the Salvation Army shelter, as that is the whole reason for their existence here in Bremerton. That's a pretty pointed statement. I keep like, wow. To provide a safe place for people to remain and receive resources. In other words, that's their responsibility. The city has no responsibility. Okay, anyways, let me go ahead and read this through all the way. Sidewalks are intended for travel and not permanent fixtures such as shelters or tents. The sidewalks need to be clear and free of obstacles so that all persons can travel safely. Primarily, our biggest concern is that children or someone with disabilities, such as in a wheelchair, need to have safe pathways to travel, and if shelters are blocking sidewalks, it forces those travelers into the streets. We can never permit anyone to set up shelter on another's private property, such as parking lots, backyards, etc. During the daytime hours, everyone is welcome to use the city parks, but there is no overnight access or camping allowed in those locations per city code. The city has a no camping ordinance, which is usually enforced at the Salvation Army, as the Salvation Army and the Kitsap Rescue Mission on Kitsap Way have beds available. And that's getting to this. The Martin v. Boise ruling held that cities cannot enforce anti-camping ordinances if they do not have enough shelter beds available for their homeless population. It did not necessarily mean a city cannot enforce any restrictions on camping or public property. Loophole. It would be wonderful if I could provide you with a different direct answer as to location for persons to exist and shelter. However, that answer for Bremerton is the Salvation Army and the Kitsap Rescue Mission. Thank you for reaching out and for the work you do with persons of need here in Bremerton. Respectfully, Sergeant Rodney Roback, Bremerton Police Department.
Yeah, see, you have the city's answer right there. There's beds available, and that's going to be the heart of the dispute, all the disputes under this case.
But are the beds available if you don't have access? Like if you're on a 48-hour or a 72-hour, then that bed's not available to you. I know that the rescue mission, you can't just show up at the rescue mission and get in. There's actually a process.
Yeah. It's kind of, it highlights a tension in the legal system. There's a principle articulated that no one who doesn't have a bed really has a choice, right? Like, that's why I like that quote. I like that one line from her so much. Like, if there is no option of sleeping indoors, the government can't criminalize indigent homeless people for sleeping outdoors, right? Mm-hmm. Like, but then when you get into the facts of it, where it's so you've got that great principle, right? But then you start getting into the factual disputes, and that's really where all the rubber hits the road in the courts. What are the facts? And it's kind of an illusion, right? That people are out there on the streets, like, living homeless because it's a lifestyle choice. That's almost what the cop is getting at there. And I think that the tension in that case, a really humanistic principle that really could enshrine as a right, not punishing people for being homeless. And then the factual dispute where it's like, well, you know, we're going to have to factually figure out whether or not you really have any choices, and that's an illusion.
Looks like Wendy's
What do you
jumping
think,
back.
Marwan?
I was just gonna say, you know, this is unfortunately it's typical. It doesn't go to actually, you know, it's been so much time trying to defend what is instead of being solution oriented, right? It's like, so what
Yeah.
else can we do? You know, we've had people come on and say, well, what about the, you know, the empty buildings? You know, what about this hospital? And oh well, you know, they could hurt themselves while they're in this building. It's like, well, you know what? It's not safe for them. It's not safe for them outdoors. So
Yeah.
you know, folks are breaking in because it's safer having some sort of shelter. Yeah, they can step on a nail, they can do all these different things, you know, put up a sign, say that the person is not at fault if they're hurt, you know, in that space, or come in and put some resources in there because that's clearly where people are going, and then support. But, you know,
Yeah.
they just defend, you know, okay, there's nothing we can do. This is what it is. And it's like, but we're looking at all these different options that could be done. You know, I thought Wendy had some really good things. It's like, okay, let's try something. And if that doesn't work, let's try something else. But let's be doing something. But right now,
Yeah.
it doesn't appear like that we're doing
Proactive.
anything. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No.
And
Welcome back, Wendy.
And at what point do the police or our mayor understand that the circuit court is above all of any court here in Kitsap County, any state court? You know what I mean? They're below the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court rejected to overturn it.
Yeah.
So let's quit trying to find roundabout ways and do what it's meant to do.
Yeah, like this case for me highlights kind of why we should revamp our system a little bit. Look at like the legal cases about whether or not police officers can arrest people for being on the street. That's our starting point of the conversation. That's really unproductive. Like in a maybe a more healthy society, we could start the conversation by being like, holy crap, there's people on the street. Let's get them off the street and help them, you know, instead of litigating whether or not we can drag them off public property. Like the whole pattern and the way the case is approached and how we're talking about it is just backwards, in my opinion. And Wendy's hitting on that. We can just do stuff now. We don't need to have a, you know, like we're waiting for the court to sort these things out. It's nonsensical.
No, they already have.
Yeah.
But I don't understand what the barrier or the problem is. I don't understand.
I think the problem is, and Rebecca said it earlier, which you missed, Wendy, is our system favors property rights and profit over people. You know, this case is about kicking people off property rather than focusing on housing people.
Well, the thing is that the mayor could make this a wonderful end of his term on doing things for the homeless. Be in the news. I mean, come on. Let's make Bremerton popular for, you know what? We have a community right here. Why don't we buy all these houses here and all these houses here? And the renters won't be complaining anymore, will they?
No.
We could have one of the houses be for elderly men, have raised garden beds so they could be in their wheelchair or walkers and be able to do that. We could have a basketball court out here for ones who want to play basketball. I mean, why does everything have to be a punishment?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we're trying to make people stay here and be homeless. That's not it. We want to get everybody a home. But until you get a home, you really can't work on problems. And you know what I mean? Going to drug rehab and detox, and coming back here and being right in the same situation, how long are you going to be detoxed and rehabbed before you start over again?
Yeah.
That's the problem. We need housing first.
I really like that vision you articulated for that block, Wendy. You're an activist. We got to get you in front of the city council with 1,000 people behind you, because that anyone who's against what you articulated for me is, you know, kind of looking at this problem in an inhumane way. So I really
and all these houses are rentals. All these houses are rental houses. And
you know what's interesting, Wendy and Sean? I've been working in this sector for several years now. I've never heard that idea. And when you don't ask the people that are affected, you're not going to get all the ideas, right? It's like, oh, we're just going to make these
Yeah.
decisions on what we think is best.
but they
They
don't
could,
know because they
yeah,
have
Yeah.
not been here. I was here for 3 years.
Wow.
3 years. And it's changed me forever, but in good ways too. That I
Yeah.
am now going to make sure that other people don't have to go through this or be so hard to get services. See, I've never done any drugs or anything like that. They can't send me to rehab or detox because I've never done any of that. So
Yeah.
I kind of fell through the loopholes.
Yeah. So
So
part of this Boise decision is this idea that you can only be arrested if you don't have a bed to go to. What do you say to that, Wendy? Like,
well, I don't think that it says that. I think that it says that you can't criminalize, penalize, or ticket a person who is homeless as if they had a choice in it.
yeah. And
So
something Marwan and I were talking about is like, is it really a choice to be homeless, right? Because that's kind of what the case is implying, that there's a choice that you can be homeless. And I don't think there's a choice.
there, like I said, there are different groups of people. But it all comes back to two with some that are mentally ill who think that they have nowhere else to go. You know what I mean? Or they may have a home somewhere.
Yeah.
And nobody really keeps track of us. I mean, how do you know that they don't have a big house down here in Shelton in
Yeah.
another county, and they're here under a fictitious name, because you don't have to give your real name.
Yeah.
So I really liked the way that the rescue mission used to have a badge, and you would have it scanned at nighttime so they know who was there. Now, if we had that system here, anytime anyone got lunch or dinner, they would have correct numbers. Where people were seen last if someone does go missing. I just think it's a really good idea.
Yeah. What other ideas do you have?
Oh
You have a lot of good ideas, Wendy.
Good one, Sean. Absolutely.
Well, these sweets that they're doing is really only costing our taxpayers and the people who give donations. It's costing them lots of money. I think it's great to have all of this be one area for family and children. You know what I mean? And everything's close. Meals, Salvation Army. We've got the respite care that will be going on right here at the old rescue mission. We have Peninsula up here where everyone goes to the doctor and gets their prescriptions. I mean, it just makes sense to have it right here.
I agree. What are things that, like, we haven't met yet, Wendy. My name's actually Sean. I'm a labor and community organizer around here. What are things you want to see from organizers? Like, what do you need from people who want to help you?
When I was homeless, or now afterwards?
Now and homeless.
Well,
both questions. Both.
I think it would be really good to have a community garden. When I was at this St. Vincent Home for Women, they had a small one, and that was my job, was going over and watering. Of course, I've been gardening. I was married for 22 years and owned a home for 10. And have had horses, and this can happen to anybody. If you think this can't happen to you, you are in denial.
I've had that same conversation out gathering signatures for whole Washington. Someone will go, I don't need universal health care because I've got a great insurance plan right now. My job covers it. It's like, okay, well, are you always going to have that job?
Well, that's it. We don't know what tomorrow will bring.
Yeah.
So we take it one day at a time. And I just think that the city council and the mayor they mean well, but they also, how should I put it? It's hard to imagine what it's like down here if you have not been actually here. You can sympathize,
Yeah.
but until you've been here, you know, it's a different world. It's a different world. But I think that Kitsap County and Bremerton is a wonderful place. I think we have so many, like we said, empty buildings. I think instead of trying to do things for getting people to come here, why don't we start doing things for people who live here? Why don't we have, a place where there's a rock wall, people can go out and climb it in one of the buildings so it can be used, all year round? If they want to change it up, they can change it up. I mean, there's so many things. I see kids skateboarding at the end of the Manette Bridge here. They're going to get hit. You know, um, but people down here too need the same things. Just because we're down here doesn't mean we're not human anymore. We still need
Wendy, I
the
wanted to ask
fun
Sean a
things.
question. You know, couldn't the city or the county use eminent domain and purchase the properties and create those that this community that Wendy is talking about?
I would think so. But I'm not a real estate um, or zoning I don't know that. But I'll tell you what, our mayor is.
Mhm.
So he'd be one to ask that question.
Sean is our resident attorney there. He said he's muted and he can't unmute. You're
Uh-oh.
not muted on my side. You're
It
good
says
on my
private
side.
chat.
Yeah, that's for
Oh, I see.
for
Yeah,
us to
I'm
talk
muted
where
and
people
can't.
can't see. Mm-hmm. So we'll let him work on his piece there. But
Okay.
I just feel I love that idea, Wendy. Using purchasing those properties. We
Hmm.
watch. I think it was this last city council meeting, or maybe it was the week before. But they're talking about doing some renovations at this huge golf course, and I'm not a golfer, so I don't have appreciation for it. But I see all this
Sure.
acreage of where housing can be put. Right, it's like priorities.
Hmm.
It's like, all right, we can play after people are fed and after people are housed and after people are healthy. Then let's have all the fun we want. Um, but it's hard to watch that, and part of it is well, the golf course is creating a profit, so we're gonna pour into that, and we're gonna support that. But it's like I just see all this land like housing. Go ahead, John. We hear you.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that. Eminent domain is an option. And this would all, what Wendy's articulating could easily fall under a social housing program where the city buys up land and develops it, seizes land through eminent domain and develops it, or sets up land trusts. So it's all doable. I think Wendy's hitting on a lack of political will from our current leaders. That's why it's not happening.
And couldn't that do a lot of things? Like, one, you purchase their homes, right? And many of these homes need a lot of work, right? They're really old, and folks can't afford to upkeep them. So they give them the fair market rate downtown, right? Which means that these folks are going to experience a come up. You help them to get into another piece of property that's
Yep.
going to be good for them, so they're not displaced, and now they're in the rental,
I believe
situation.
a lot of them are rented to the Navy too.
And then yeah, and don't run to the Navy. I've got my thoughts on that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
keep
Well, and
folks first.
just like the Salvation Army is going to has purchased Monica's here. They're going to have to do some renovations to this in order for it to be that's going to be a food bank. So it'd be
Mhm.
perfect to have these other
Yeah.
buildings over here. Everything is right here at their fingertips.
And why not make it a workforce development thing where you say, you know what, we're going to use local labor. We're
Yeah.
going to train
Sure.
folks and give them a skill that don't have it, right? We're not going to go and find some, outfit out of California to come in and renovate and do all this. We'll get, hire local labor and incentivize and give them the subsidy to say, hey, you know what, we're going to teach people these skills to take care of, give 'em, I mean, you're giving them so many transferable skills, right? Just being able to swing a hammer and
Okay.
different things.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to
And they
hand
can
this
go off and
over
continue
to
to do that.
I'm going to hand this over to
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Wendy.
And I apologize. I
Great
apologize for
ideas.
interrupting. We need to get out of here. We've overstayed our welcome. I want to say that if you were downtown ever and looking for a place to have a beer, come down to Monica Social Club because it is an amazing place. They've got a great beer garden, and we came in here and used their shake. It was the only place, and they've been kind and really appreciate it. Now, my other final plug. And I think that I'm going to have to shut down here, Marwan, for just a few minutes and go relocate. But let me throw in a real quick plug for Heathen's Bakery, who people just love their treats out here. Her treats. This is Jennifer Chamberlain's bakery.
Nice.
And so I picked up a bunch of her stuff and brought it down here to people, and they've been. It's gone over a big. They've loved these treats.
We'll give her a horn for that.
Yeah.
Does anyone from Monica's want to come on and
they do,
plug?
and I want to talk to you about that. Not for right now, but yeah, I think for a future show, there's a lot of different perspectives and people that would like to speak. So I think we will carry on this conversation. Hopefully.
Well, tell them yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I do.
And we probably. I think we probably should end it here. We've been going for 2.5 hours. We can either pick it back up next Sunday at 1. We'll go back to our regularly scheduled time. Or if there's some time during the week, you guys want to jump on and finish this out, we can do that too. But our viewers, they definitely complain when I have shows that are too long.
Yeah. Well, I have our regular city council roundup. So that's probably an hour long, but so maybe we could tape that some other time. Whenever it's convenient for you. I think now's probably I'm exhausted too. I'm sure if anybody watching, people are like, "Oh my god, how long can this people?" But this has been good stuff today. I think I don't know, just like listening to all of it, it's been amazing. I hope.
Oh no, it is good stuff. And my longest broadcast was 12 hours.
Oh, really?
For the Kids Have Great Gifts.
12?
Yeah, that was a long day. 12 hours straight of like broadcast. I was like Jerry Lewis.
I think today was uplifting. Like we got Rebecca, who's offering a really positive option for voters, and then Wendy and Chris was his name. It was really interesting to listen to them.
I have to drop off. I'll let you guys continue, but I will talk to you guys later. Thanks, Marwan.
You got it. Thanks, Jeff.
See ya. Yeah, I think it was productive. I'm happy to come back and talk more.
Sure. Well, I mean, we do our Civic Second every Sunday at 1 p.m. Unless I'm with my daughter, and right now she's in Alabama, but she gets back in a few days. So
freedom, education, and family. That's all we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I was telling people don't know, but we were talking behind the scenes. Like it's a pleasure to have gotten to know you, and we're already doing something, so quickly, which is awesome. And that's really how it's intended to be. It's like get together, build relationship, build community, and advocate for each other and make change. So I appreciate meeting you. I look forward to meeting you in person, which I believe will be Wednesday at the Pancake Breakfast, everyone. So everyone is invited, and that is 11 a.m. at 4040 Wheaton Way in Bremerton, Washington. Suite 203. And when Chris was mentioning before the organization he was working for, that's the church. So they definitely believe in, really serving the community. So which is awesome. But I'm gonna give you the final word today.
All right. Well, after hearing what Rebecca and Wendy and Chris had to say, in Kitsap County, there's a solid grassroots movement building with the West Sound Democratic Socialists of America and my union, the Industrial Workers of the World. And what we're building, and Jeff's kind of leading this for us. He doesn't want to talk about it as a leader, but Jeff is a leader on this, is really getting into the community behind Wendy's and the Salvation Army and doing some grassroots work to maybe bring social housing to that block. So if people are interested in that, reach out and find us. We're talking about this stuff, and we're actually doing the legwork on it. So we need help, and if anything, come learn, because more than anything, we have a lot of fun doing what we're doing, like community organizing. getting to know your neighbors and like working on democratic solutions to these problems is a lot of fun. And even if you don't have a lot of time to give, you know, all we ask sometimes is a half hour a week. And we're all kind of in the same struggle too, as far as time and what we can get done. So join us. A movement is growing and we need people to help us out.
I like it. I think that's a great final word. The only thing I'd add to that is please listen to everyone. You know, answered solutions come from everywhere. Got to be willing to learn and listen to every voice.
I like what Russell Brand has to say. We're all awakening wonders. You know, we all have something to say and contribute in this. So yeah, that's great, Marwan.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. For Sean, Jeff, Rebecca, I am Marwan Cameron. This is the Conduit. This was the Civic Second. We'll be back next Sunday with another episode of the Civic Second. Otherwise, we will be back here. I'll probably do a show before Wednesday, but the pancake breakfast, everyone's invited. $3.99, our favorite price. We will see you then.